Welcome to the Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I am one of your co-hosts, Derek Anderson, and I'm joined today by Scott Drebit, Bryan Christopher, and Tamika Jones. Today we are going to dive into one of the recent releases, one of the big movies. I guess you could call it one of the biggest horror movies of the year so far, and that is Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man. So this movie has definitely left an imprint on the box office. It came away with nearly 30 million in its opening weekend, and it's got a lot of buzz. It seems like a lot of people are going to see this movie. Just to start things off, let's go around the table and just kind of talk about our initial impressions of the movie, what your theater-going experience was like. And maybe let's start with you, Scott. What was your Invisible Man theater-going experience like? Was it an intense showing? Did you have a good audience? What was the vibe like at the theater?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you done?
I was just going to describe your entire experience for you, but I suppose I should let you talk just a little bit.
You nailed it. No, I went on a Tuesday afternoon early, so there wasn't a lot of people there, but that was fantastic. And you mentioned it brought in nearly 30 million, which is fantastic, but only on a budget of 7. And if Leigh Whannell can take $7 million and make a movie that has a fairly sizable scope like this and a polish, then man, I hope it's setting a great example, because we need more movies that are really, low budget and high gain like this are terrific.
I can't believe that was only $7 million. I had no idea the budget was that low. You would not know it to look at it. He is so good at making a tiny, like he did the same thing with Upgrade. It was a tiny budget, and he's so good at just making it look like, 10 times that.
Yeah, the production design alone looks so expensive, like in the laboratory scenes, that I was thinking, even while watching, I'm like, really? This is a Blumhouse budget? This looks a little more like a full-on Universal 100 million plus budget. So that I think they did a really good job really squeezing the dollar even more than usual on this movie. But Bryan, what was your theater going experience like? Was the crowd really into it? Did you have anybody yelling at the screen or anything like that, or was everyone
nobody yelling,
kind of immersed? Okay.
It was a Saturday matinee, so it was fairly low key. A little worried because people were a little chatty before things got started, but everybody settled down for the most part. Everybody seemed to be pretty well intent on the movie, which I can't say the same for the last couple of experiences I've had. So it was nice to have everybody be there and kind of, be drawn into the movie, which is, I guess, a testament to Leigh Whannell's talent, because everybody was pretty entranced. So it was a good experience, and obviously, with good reason, because it was definitely a great movie.
Yes, yeah, definitely seemed to have, like, my screening too. It was almost a sold out theater. It seemed like everyone was just really immersed in it, but they were very vocal at the right times too. It felt almost like seeing a movie back in the day when I don't know, it just feels like going back to like action movies or things like that, even horror movies back in the 2000s. It seemed like audiences were more vocal. I don't know if that was because there was no cell phones, and now I really don't know what the recipe is there, but it just seemed like such a great movie-going experience. And like when you are actually kind of like almost cheering for the main character, it seemed like it had that kind of a vibe to it. Tamika, what was your experience like? Was it a pretty memorable screening for you?
No, because I bootlegged the movie. No, I'm just kidding. I would,
oh gosh,
would never do such a thing. Now, if this was like when I didn't know any better, like I don't know, like during like Napster or whatever, LimeWire.
The hacker days.
The hacker, yes. Sadly, I feel robbed of a really cool theater experience, because normally I have a really cool story about somebody usually spilling something on me, like their popcorn or whatever. But I saw it. It was like a Saturday morning, and I sadly was like maybe just like one of 4 people in the theater. So it's really cool to learn that the movie, made a lot of money on its opening weekend, because I try to gauge how well I think a movie is going to do by how many people are in the theater and how many people I hear talking about it. So I heard a lot of people talking about it, but there was like hardly anyone in my screening.
It was like a Saturday morning kind of vibe, like a little less crowds.
It was like 11, and like sometimes it is packed. So I don't know. There's a lot going on. There could be a lot of factors for that, but I wanted to be like, obviously I didn't want people to like talk or anything. That gets on my nerves, but I missed like the gasping and the screaming and throwing things, but I still had a really good time. I really enjoyed the movie, but I gotta say that if you don't really think, I'm sure we're gonna get into this later, but I think you can have like the best time if you try not to like think about certain things so hard. So if maybe you guys know what I'm getting at.
Some of the science,
well, possibly. We'll get to that for sure.
Yeah.
You know me. I like to get into the entire movie within the first 10 minutes of the podcast, but
true.
Since
the entire movie,
since I've been entrusted to keep the ship on course, I'm going to try not to sink it, but can't make any promises.
Where's your like 1-for-1 synopsis where it's like literally the entire length of the movie?
Yeah, usually I just read the Wikipedia page. But that does bring me to my point. We will be getting into spoilers on this episode, so eventually we will get to that point. So we definitely recommend you see the movie first before we really dig into some of the more plot specifics. But before we do that, what's everyone's like Invisible Man, I guess, history? Because there's obviously a universal monster. We've seen several iterations of this. It all started with the H.G. Wells novel back in 1898. So does anyone, I know like Bryan, you did a catalog from the beyond on the Invisible Man. Was that something that you've always been a fan of, or are you kind of newer to this?
I only watched it for the first time for the catalog entry I did on it. And to be honest, it's actually, of the ones I've seen, my favorite Universal monster movie. I do need to kind of put a caveat on that. I have not seen all of them, not even all of like the absolute classic ones, just because they usually don't connect with me. Like I appreciate them as kind of the artifacts of the kind of the initial horror push and, kind of what they represent for influencing everything that came after. But usually I'm a little clocked out within the first half hour for some of these movies. But that was not the case with the original Invisible Man, just because it had a lot of personality that I didn't see in other movies. It had some dark humor. Claude Rains was really bringing some personality to it, where I kind of feel like he was the precursor to like your Freddy Kruegers and the folks who bring a little kind of panache to their villainy. He was enjoying himself, both the character and I think the actor was having fun kind of doing his thing, even though apparently to get some of the effects. That was another reason why I enjoyed it, was kind of seeing how they pulled off those effects in the 1930s in terms of making him look invisible. But it also, I guess, didn't make for the most pleasant experience for filming for Claude Rains, because he was claustrophobic and had to wrap himself in like this very tight black velvet material that kind of acted as like a precursor to green screen. They said that probably wasn't the best experience for him, but I don't know, maybe that kind of made him that kind of on edge act that he was doing. I think that might have contributed to that, because I think he's awesome at it. And I really do love, like I said, it's my favorite of the Universal monster movies.
Well, of the ones I've seen, it's certainly one of my favorites. Excuse me. I think I like Bride of Frankenstein even a little bit more. But this one, what I like about this one and why I find it different than the others I've seen is that it's mean.
Right? It goes there. Like that train derailment that he does. That's insane.
No, it's a mean movie. It's a cynical movie. It's a dark movie. Even Frankenstein has some romanticism to him, right? But this is it's a vicious movie, and I think that's why people are still associating it or are associating it with the new one, which I think has a lot of that same kind of sharpness to it,
Yeah.
Oh.
No, you go for it. Yeah. I didn't have anything else to add. So
I like to call when we accidentally speak at the same time, I call those like little car accidents, like, oop, we banged into each other.
and we do suggest you can make a drinking game out of that because it happens occasionally. Although my comment is and if we're going to do a drinking game, Derek corrects himself because The Invisible Man came out in 1897. It was War of the Worlds that was published in 1898. So I got my Wellian trivia mixed up. I do apologize.
You are fired.
Scott, you are now taking over the show.
And we've killed the. And I'm sure people by now realize we don't actually have a table. The curtain has been drawn back, I think, on our whole facade here.
What are you talking about? I'm looking right at you. Oh, but you're invisible.
It's all over.
Nice.
It's all over.
Nice. Tied in. No, I think, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I don't know if I think that the film, the original is mean, but more so, and obviously, Scott, that's totally fine that you see it that way. But I think I took it as what I guess would inevitably happen, because this might, I think if a person discovered or somehow found a way to make themselves invisible, after a while, I can see how that would maybe start to corrupt them, and how you can kind of start to do the things, the really kind of like awful things that happen in the movie. Because it's like, I don't know. I don't see the like helping ladies cross the street. Like, I can't see that like lasting too long. Plus, it would freak everyone out. So it's like, wait, who just touched me and helped me across the street?
Well,
you could still traumatize them.
I think that's what's interesting. I think that's what's interesting about the remake, because in most cases with the original Invisible Man and a lot of movies where they kind of tackle the invisibility trope, thinking about things like Hollow Man and stuff like that, they kind of talk about it as someone who might have some flaws but is corrupted by the invisibility. Usually they'll incorporate some aspect of like the process that also corrupts them. Like in the original Invisible Man, there's like one of the chemicals kind of drives him insane, in addition to the absolute power of being invisible corrupting him. I think what I appreciated about the Invisible Man remake was that this person is already absolutely repugnant. Like, he is an awful person just from go. And so it's not the invisibility that does it. The invisibility is just another tool that he employs to be an awful person. So it was an interesting new take that I thought Whannell brought to the story.
And also, by doing that, he's had the bad guy, instead of having his arc go over the length of a movie, his arc is done when he starts, which then forces our POV to go to our heroine, which is a reversal of the original, right? In the original, it was from his point of view. In this one, that's already been played out, and now it's the victim's point of view. And that was really fascinating to me.
Which is also, it's amazing that they've never done that before, because the scares in a movie like this are derived from seeing it from the person's point of view who doesn't know what's going on. So to usually be following the invisible person is kind of a wasted opportunity. So it's another kind of another point for Whannell for kind of taking this remake and doing something new with it, and something that really made it a scary watch by putting us in the point of view of the person being affected by the Invisible Man rather than the Invisible Man himself.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the genius of this movie, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of Hollow Man from Paul Verhoeven years ago. But just even more though, I mean, this is way more. I think there's definitely a lot to dissect here, and I think it makes it even scarier when you are seeing it through Elisabeth Moss's eyes, and you don't know like what is real, like where is Oliver Jackson Cohen's character, where is her abusive ex, and it's that kind of, I get more ambiguity to the story. It's almost, it kind of creates an unreliable narrator, although we definitely know that she's not exactly crazy just from seeing her home life a little more than the people around her. But yeah, it's kind of fascinating how he was able to take something like this. And I think this bodes really well for like the whole new Universal Monsters universe. If they want to, like, if they're really opening the doors to bring new approaches to these classic stories, this is the way to do it. I think this is like I think this is going to open so many doors for so many different types of stories like this that are so contemporary and relevant, and yet they're still telling this timeless tale too.
Yeah, well, I think, when it comes to Blumhouse, I mean, Jason Blum is like the Roger Corman of our time in horror. Low cost, high quality, and that's because he brings on interesting filmmakers, right? Not every one of them works, but when they do work, oh boy, it just shows that, a good movie is a good movie no matter how much it costs. And when audiences can react to it, which they are, I think, quite strongly, even with this new one, it really bodes well for the future, hopefully.
And I think whoever, if they're going to keep going with this model for the Universal Monster movies, whoever did the casting for this, and I would have to imagine it's the same person who did the casting for Upgrade, like that is such a big part of how they're able to make these small budgets seem so much bigger and so much more compelling, because the people in them are committed. Logan Marshall Green in Upgrade was absolutely committed to the premise and, brought a sense of reality to it. And that times 1,000 for Elisabeth Moss in The Invisible Man. Like, this is essentially a one-woman show, and she 100% carries it on her shoulders.
Yeah. Are we still spoiler free, Derek?
I think we can cross into spoiler filled waters at this point. Because since we're going to start diving into the film a little bit more, I think this is the point of no return. If you have not seen the movie, go back, go to the cinema and then come back, and we'll wait for you. And otherwise, let us continue this discussion, and feel free to talk freely about any Invisible Man spoilers.
All right.
So, but
if we had any spoilers,
I can't believe it turned out to be an alien the whole time.
I know, right? Oh my gosh!
I'm telling you though, if we did have spoilers, that was quite the introduction.
As I dissipate into the darkness after this foreboding message, I don't know why I always seem to do like Vincent Price segues when I'm hosting here. So, but you mentioned Elisabeth Moss, and she is phenomenal. I know last year we got to see her in Jordan Peele's Us in a supporting role, and I thought she was really brilliant in the more limited screen time that she had, like in the beach house, and the whole Beach Boys scene I thought was one of the best scenes of a horror movie last year. But obviously she's been doing this for a long time. Handmaid's Tale. I mean, it seems like no matter what she does, she just brings it to the next level. And I think she's so perfect to play Cecilia because she just has a way of like you said, getting so into the role, and yet you can almost see like how this life has really gotten under her skin, and like people just don't know if they can really trust her. Like she's good at playing someone who everyone thinks is crazy but actually isn't. I mean, it's such a complex role, but I think she really walks that tightrope well. Do y'all think that she's on par to maybe get some recognition by the end of the year?
I think
no,
so.
just because she's in the wrong genre for that.
Well,
also true.
But we'll recognize her.
She's so compelling on Handmaid's Tale, though, you know? So I think with this, she can really only go up. At least I hope so anyway. Because it is really, really tough to carry a role like this on your own, basically. And because it's so nuanced, you know, like she has to hold up the suspense for, you know, almost 2 hours. Like, is she like, is like, you know, her partner like invisible? Is this all in her mind? And then that kind of plays into, you know, gaslighting, which I absolutely hate, and feeling alone. And that just only makes, you know, what she's experiencing that much worse, you know? And it's hard. I imagine it's really tough to keep that going, like keep that energy and that tension going for so long. So I hope so. I want to see her in like 3 more things. I want her to be like the new The Rock. I want her to be in like 3 more things this year.
No, I think it's just to start. It's a really well developed character. She's a good person, but she does have flaws. She, you know, that there's a vulnerability that she brings out, even though it's a strong character, which is completely necessary for the suspense to be fully brought. And she runs the whole gamut in this movie. She gets put through the ringer. So there's not only fear, but there's, well, it's mostly fear, but it's anger. So much righteous anger, which I think is the most important thing that comes through. And so you look forward to their final confrontation because it's 2 very powerful characters, and you really don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, it's a very unpredictable match. Like even when she knows, like we see early on, she throws the paint on Adrian, and we can kind of see like she figures out ways to make him visible. He always seems to have the upper hand, and we find out later that there's a couple of reasons for that. He's not necessarily working alone, which is quite a brilliant twist. And then there's never really a safe moment. I mean, it's such a claustrophobic horror movie in a lot of ways, because once it starts like this, as soon as she wakes up in bed to the last frame of the movie, you're really not sure what's going to happen next. And that's pretty amazing when you're not only dealing with a pre-existing property, but it's, you know, you're working with a horror audience that's pretty used to tropes and the different beats of a movie. But I think Leigh Whannell really made it unpredictable and even kind of anticipated what we might expect story-wise in a lot of ways, which made it that much more interesting watching it for the first time.
Well, you know, here's the thing. When I got home after it was over, my eyes were killing me and I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized that it was because I was watching every single frame at every second, looking for any kind of fluctuation in air motion, right? Looking for anything. So I was transfixed the entire movie, except for when his suit glitches and then you get to see him. But other than that, I realized I was squinting the whole time because I didn't want to miss. I didn't know when it was coming. And the way he does it is just brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. I was doing the same thing, Scott. Like I spent most of the movie looking at the background. Like I wasn't looking at the characters. I was looking like, okay, where is he? And I think he was also good about, and by he I mean I think Whannell was good about not being too cheap with it in terms of like there were certain times where like he would give clues as to where he was going to be, just in terms of like when Elisabeth Moss goes out onto the porch and you can see her breath, like you can kind of see where that's going to go. Like if they're making a point of seeing her breath, of course that's going to, come up behind her with, not being able to see where the breath is coming from. I will say, to the point that Tamika might have been hinting at, because another thing I was doing throughout a lot of the movie, I was trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to see hints that he's there? And B, how realistic is it that even though you can't see him, that you don't know he's there? Like they take invisibility to kind of like an extreme in terms of like he's also really good at being absolutely silent in a room where other people are there. Like when he's breathing behind her, like he's right there. So there's certain parts where like I think you have to kind of suspend disbelief a little bit. I don't know if anybody else was picking up on that, but it was a couple of moments where it was like it's invisibility. It's not like you're not there. You're going to be able to sense that someone, and you get those certain scenes where she can sense it, but like, I don't know. It just, I think it's almost like there would need to be a level of like invisible, like military tactics training that I don't think this guy has taken, but it seems like he is like very, very adept with in this movie.
Okay. But you know what? That's like, someone who watches a Bugs Bunny cartoon and when he, falls straight down and survives, and then someone goes, "Oh, right, I'm sure that could happen. Like he'd still be alive." My point is, he's invisible. We've already crossed the threshold. I don't need my Michael Crichton science, dwelt on for me. And I think that's another thing. Seriously, though, that I love about this movie is Leigh Whannell is such a big fan of the B movie aesthetic, the Roger Corman aesthetic. He doesn't tell us how the suit works. Mm-hmm. He shows us the suit, and we're just supposed to piece it together, which is awesome. That's how you save $30 million right there. Right.
And just so we're clear, me noticing that, like, it was just stuff that I noticed and got a little bit of a chuckle out of.
I know.
It didn't reduce the enjoyment for the movie at all. And in fact, that kind of added to the charm. Like you said, it's kind of like, they know what they are. They're not trying to get too deep into this. They're not trying to say like, ooh, what if this was real life?
But that's the brilliance of great low budget filmmaking, right? Mm-hmm. Is like I said, there's that secret room. The suit is there. You see there are cameras on the suit, and that's all he gives you. And you're just supposed to go along with the rest, I love that about it.
And that's where it kind of keeps its retro sensibilities, where it's like we don't need to, because it could have been really easy doing this story in modern day, like you said, to just do really like hard sci-fi, kind of explain everything, almost do like an Iron Man suit or something, and just really have that exposition. But the beauty of it is, like you said, everyone's smart enough to kind of see what's going on, and then you're able to spend more time, because it's still over a 2-hour movie. So you're able to spend more time on what really matters. And that's the characters and the really great set pieces and the cat and mouse game. Like it's a really, for as long a movie as it is, it's really lean in its storytelling. It never feels like it really overstays its welcome, which I think if they had tried to do like a third act, let's, explain everything, even like the stuff with the brother wasn't really dived into that much. I mean, they touched on it, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, we found a letter that explains, the motive behind every single decision, which I think is great for a movie like this.
No, well, and that's also part of one of the twists of the movie is that there really is no way to dive more into the brothers' story without giving away the fact that they're working together, right?
Very true.
So it's Whannell he's a master of economy. You know, there's no extraneous information in this movie, that doesn't need to be there.
Which is crazy to think that it's a slightly over 2 hours long. I would have never guessed that movie is that long.
No.
Nope.
And I'm the first person to recognize when a movie has outstayed its welcome, and that was not an issue with this film. And one thing I particularly appreciated, because as it was getting towards the end, when you realize it's the brother, like I thought they were going to leave it open-ended in terms of, like, they show that there's another suit. So I thought when it turned out to be the brother, it's going to be one of those things where it's like, so he's still out there, and then roll credits. I appreciate that they went that extra step to give it a definitive ending.
Well, it's a noir ending.
Mm-hmm.
It's a total noir ending.
And one that, as I've thought about it, it works on a couple of levels. There's the fist pump element to it. She finally got him. She finally gave him a taste of his own medicine. But there's also something kind of really sad about the way it ended. If you're looking at this movie through the context of domestic violence, and you see this ending as a way that a lot of these relationships wind up ending, where, like, the law doesn't work for women who are in a violent relationship, and then they wind up having to take the situation into their own hands. In this case, it worked out for her because she had a friend in law enforcement, so he kind of, was able to help her sweep it under the rug. But a lot of times, in what is essentially self-defense, women wind up going to jail for killing people that have been abusing them. So I think kind of tapping on the fact that that's the direction she needed to go to get some kind of closure, I thought was really interesting and tragic in a way. But also, like, you're also not going to not enjoy seeing this guy get his throat slit either. So it was a really good ending.
And it's, yeah. Oh, have a drink, everybody.
So obviously, the major theme of the movie is gaslighting.
Mm-hmm.
And Tamika, you touched on that earlier, and I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit or a lot bit or more, because, that's something that we as men really don't experience.
Well, I mean, from her perspective, it's just so frustrating because you're not believed, like, you're not taken seriously. And in the end, you're the one left, experiencing all of this violence, by yourself, because everyone around you, even the her friends who, like, Aldous Hodge, who are in her corner, like, eventually at some point they just get tired of it too. And because they don't live her life and they're not in her shoes, they kind of, and I get that, they have a completely different perspective, and so they get kind of frustrated with what's going on. And so they leave her alone, to figure out what she's how to fix, the situation that she's in. And so it's just frustrating to watch that, as someone who feels like, my thoughts and my feelings are dismissed. And feeling so alone and frustrated, that just completely hit me on a whole other level. And I related to her and to her character. And even dealing with Simone, some issues of domestic violence in the past, It was really hard to watch that because even though it's almost like you feel like you're of two minds, right? You feel like you shouldn't have to deal with what you're dealing with alone. But at the same time, you understand why the people around you get kind of like frustrated because they're not really in a place to be able to help you the way that you need because they're people too and they have their own things. So it just feels like just a crazy cycle. It's just a never ending cycle of just anger and frustration. And at some point, I mean, that's gotta go somewhere, you know, like you can't live that's just no way to live. So obviously with the way that the film ends, you know, I mean, that was a great ending for a movie because that just wouldn't happen in real life, you know, like you can't just, you know, kill your abuser and that's that. Like, well, that's that. We move on with our lives.
Do you think Whannell did a good job portraying that? Like, did he get it right?
I think so. I mean, I certainly didn't feel in any way that, you know, like the writing was lacking or, you know, missed the mark in any way. I thought it was really kind of great that he would take this kind of spin on the story because, I mean, he could have, you know, approached this film in 1,000 ways. And I thought it was really interesting that he chose something really sensitive, like a really sensitive topic, and do it in a really nuanced way so that it didn't feel disingenuous, one, and it doesn't feel ham-fisted, you know, like it just felt maybe like he knows someone who's, you know, had similar, like, you know, experiences with some type of violence or something. Because it just felt, I don't know, like, it just felt very authentic. And I appreciated that, really. And I'm sure that other people who've been in similar situations probably feel the same way. Like, wow, okay. This is interesting.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I was nervous going into this movie because I had heard so much about how it relates to domestic violence and gaslighting. And it's kind of one of those things where, you know, I've been fortunate to have not had that experience, especially with gaslighting, but those kinds of stories like gaslighting, but also just like movies where people are either like framed or are in a situation where everybody thinks they're the bad guy, for whatever reason, like really gets under my skin and kind of like makes me really anxious. And so I knew going into it that like I was kind of bracing myself. I was a little hesitant. But it was also a really interesting experience because I almost felt like Whannell did something similar, I think, to what Jordan Peele did with Get Out, which was give people who haven't been through a certain experience a chance to get some kind of sense what that's like through that person's point of view. Mm-hmm. Which I thought was really good. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't want to go as far to say that he did it as well as Jordan Peele, mainly just because, you know, Jordan Peele is obviously someone who was writing from experience. Leigh Whannell, I'm not sure. Tamika, you had mentioned that, you know, it seems to be pretty on the mark, and, you know, he might know somebody who'd been through a situation like that. And, you know, there are some rare instances where, you know, certainly men are in relationships like that where they're the victims.
Yes.
You know, so who knows? Maybe he has been through something like that. But it was, you know, I think these are kind of two movies, this and Get Out, that are kind of, it would be like a really morbid double feature to be like white men learn what oppression feels like double feature.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very empathetic.
Here,
yeah, yes. It is amazing the level of empathy that you do feel, and it puts you in someone else's shoes. And I think, like you mentioned, Get Out, and now with Invisible Man, it feels like you're really experiencing it through that main character's eyes. And that's where, yeah, you feel like the frustration. And then afterwards, you're like, oh my gosh, people, you know, at least it's a movie for a lot of us where we can leave and go back to our lives. But a lot of people, this is their lives. And that, I think whenever a movie makes you realize that, that's pretty intense. And I think it's amazing that a movie can kind of open your eyes even more and kind of change how you look at things. And I think, you know, like you said, Get Out certainly does that. And I think this really does it too. So Blumhouse is always, you know, kind of good at having social commentary in their movies, but also really like taking it to that next step. So I definitely would agree. It's that and more. It really, it makes you think. So, and on top of that, you've got some really great technical stuff too. We kind of mentioned like Upgrade, but Leigh Whannell, in addition to the emotional aspect of the story, he's putting in a lot with the Invisible Man's suit and the way he films the action. I just kind of want to get your thoughts, maybe starting with you, Scott, on just that whole action scene, like that third act where the violence like really escalates, and it almost feels like a little bit of Upgrade in there, just the way that everything's being filmed.
No, that was great. I just want to rewind for just a second ago, and what were we talking about right before the technical? The emotional, the empathy. Yeah.
Yep, the eye-opening.
And it's gone, so let's go.
Oh, crap. See ya.
No, I know.
I washed it away with meaningless.
I know what it is. We were talking about social commentary.
Yes.
And so those words to me can sound like medicine. Bad, cold medicine on your tongue when it's done poorly. Right? And I mean, Get Out and The Invisible Man are both cases where, you know, it's not rammed down your throat like some kind of PSA. It's done in a clever, artful way that isn't preaching to you. It's telling you everything you need to know through story, you know? So sometimes when it works out right, you know, the medicine tastes really, really good.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there, Scott. It definitely, it's not after school special, which is nice. It's a little more smart about it. And like we were talking about how you don't have to explain everything. I think it comes across better when you put the social commentary into the story rather than the story into the social commentary. And yeah, so it has a great emotional side to it. I think there's a lot of great technical aspects to the movie as well. I think Leigh Whannell has a ton of fun filming the action of the movie. What did you guys think about like the whole third act? Because that's when it really goes bonkers. We have the hospital scene that I think is it's almost comedic how many people end up getting into that fight. But what did y'all think of the action, particularly towards the end of the movie?
I would say even before the hospital scene, the big showstopper for me is the scene where they kind of first, and by they I mean Elisabeth Moss and Elisabeth Moss character and Adrian. I'm mixing actors and character names. Cecilia, is that her name?
Yes.
Yep.
Cecilia and Adrian, when they first really start going at it when he's invisible, it's such a well-crafted scene because it's really well done from Elisabeth Moss' point of view, because you know, I don't know how much of that is she's actually interacting with someone. Like, I don't know if like maybe they had him in a stop motion suit or whoever was doing that. Or I don't know if like she's acting by herself most of the time and like, I don't know, like, you know, trying to hit a tennis ball in the head with plates or something like that. But it comes together so well because it's been building to this moment where you get these little moments where you see, the someone picking the knife up off the table, or, you know, when he's messing with her and stepping on the sheet. So like you can see that there's hints there, but she's not quite sure. Like she's not even sure if she can trust her own brain. So then when it all kind of comes to a head and they're just duking it out in the kitchen, It's just so great. And it's so dynamic too, because the camera is moving along with everything that's going on. Like as she's getting dragged across the floor, you can't see him, but it's, the camera is traveling along with her and with Adrian. And it's just so well done. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like Whannell knew that, if he's going to build up, he needs to build up to something that's going to really knock our socks off. And I think he did that in spades in that scene.
Yeah. And there have been some people who've likened it to The Entity, the Barbara Hershey movie from 82 or 83. And he's very vicious to her in this movie. Adrian is very vicious to Cecilia. You really feel it, and you really feel for her. So it does have that in common with The Entity, but in the case of The Entity, that movie is more like a docudrama, whereas in Leigh Whannell's hands, it becomes, a sci-fi action horror thriller. All these different influences, all these great B influences that he brings, and energy that he brings to the movie is so exciting. And honestly, I'm just so happy for the guy, because Upgrade was a movie that everyone, certainly in our world, most people adored, but it certainly didn't have the box office and the release that The Invisible Man, and to see it doing so well and that it resonates with so many people is, I just couldn't be happier for the guy, because he's a really good director, like really good.
It's continuing, like it didn't stop at that first weekend. I was looking, and I think as of like today, it's up to like 53 million or something like that. So it's it's not puttering out after that first weekend, which is nice to see.
Yeah, this feels a little more like the new Dark Universe that they had kind of hoped to do, and I don't really know if we're going to get an Avengers type cinematic world in with these movies, because I know Universal's kind of opened their doors to all different kinds of filmmakers come in and pitch ideas for different properties, like Frankenstein's monster and Dracula and all these different ones. It'll be interesting.
I'm going to be interested to see, because isn't one of the next movies on the docket, isn't Elizabeth Banks doing an Invisible Woman movie?
Yes. Yeah. And that one
I'll be interested to see, like, is this going to be a continuation where, like, are we going to pick up with what becomes of Elisabeth Moss character, or is this going to be something entirely different? I'll be interested to see the path they go with that.
I mean, I think when that was announced, it seemed like its own thing, almost like there was going to be a little more, I don't know if there's going to be a little more humor in that one or what, but honestly, though, if you're going to do a sequel to this, like, it would be totally natural to call it Invisible Woman, especially since, the way she ends up with her own suit, and, she could go and kick everyone's ass. All the, a bunch of other, abusive guys she could kind of become almost like a superhero in a lot of ways. So I'd be very curious to see, like, where this story goes next, because I feel like it definitely could just stand alone. But also, do you think, like, they should do like 3 Invisible Man movies with Elisabeth Moss? Do you think that would, like, people would respond to that, or would it be like, oh, we've already seen this, let's do something different?
You know what? I don't know. What I'm excited about is, when they first came up with the Dark Universe, obviously they thought, let's start big, right?
Yep.
We have the biggest star in the world. We'll throw 200 million down, and we'll set it up for this whole universe of different, universal monsters. And people didn't bite. They just didn't bite. It just wasn't that good. But now the great hope is, you can spend $7 million, just do a simple, modern, by itself movie, and forget about this world building. Get a great talent, not a lot of money, but a whole lot of creativity, and create something great, and do that picture by picture. And, there's a lot of young, hungry, super talented filmmakers out there that, would kill for $7 million budget, and probably would bring that same sense of adventure that Whannell brings to this, right?
Yeah, Universal, it was almost like they made the same mistake that Warner Brothers did, where they kind of tried to jump in front of the line with the whole world building thing.
Totally.
Forgetting the fact that even when Marvel did it, they started off with a singular entity. They started off with Iron Man, and they really only made it about that. They had that minor hint at the end, but they didn't try and already start with like, there's this whole, world of people that are going to come together, like DC did with trying to do like Justice League right away. And, that was the mistake I think Universal made by having, trying to bring all these elements in one movie already, where there's the Mummy, but there's also the aspects of like the Jekyll and Hyde thing that are already there. In this case with the Invisible Man, none of that could ever come to fruition in terms of like any kind of universe building. And this is still a super solid movie just all by itself.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a parallel to Iron Man like that. Tamika, what do you think?
I definitely agree. I am kind of at a peak with world building. I'm a little burnt out. I think it's interesting that the Mummy didn't work the way that Universal thought it would, because if you think about Marvel, DC, and how studios approach, material like the Mummy and stuff like that, they kind of do think big, $150 million budget. It's like, no, you can make it small. You can make it really intimate and just kind of focus on, one really good character and one really good, aspect to a story, and put all of your attention into that. And I mean, we've seen it work, now Joker obviously had a budget that was larger than 7 million, but still, it's not connected to anything else, even though, yeah, they are using the Joker character, but, it's not connected to, the DC EU, I think it's called, or something like that. It's just its own thing. And I would be I'd be kind of bummed to see like Invisible Man Part 4, Electric Boogaloo, or I was like, no, this movie just works on its own, and it's so beautiful on its own. I don't know. I don't want it to connect to anything else.
It would be particularly disappointing to watch a movie featuring invisible people doing breakdancing. I think that really wouldn't be a visual treat.
You really don't need a budget for that, though.
Good point.
It's literally just like it's like a single shot on like the cardboard that's laid out, and you just like hear people say like, "Okay, now watch this."
But we can do that one for $4 million.
Right? Yeah, we can cut out a little bit of the budget, just a little bit.
It's like $2 million on just like the boombox, a floating boombox. Like that's going to require a budget.
Oh yeah, big time.
2 wires. $100,000.
Oh my gosh! But I mean, do you guys think that there probably will be some sort of sequel because of how the film ends? Because I mean, it doesn't really have like this, like bow on it. It's not completely definitive.
I was just going to say he's very dead.
Right.
Well,
right. So unless you're going to make her the villain, which, would erase everything that this has done, or you have another Invisible Man come after, and she's like, next summer, Elisabeth Moss. Oh, not another one, and then she's on the hunt of another Invisible Man, and I don't think that would necessarily play. So
I know.
I think
I don't know.
I could see it as maybe like a vigilante story if she kind of makes it her job, because she has a lot of money now, She has the technology. Like maybe she hunts down people that are really abusive or just evil in general. And I guess I could kind of see it like that. And I also thought it was interesting, like at the end of the movie when Aldous Hodge's character James kind of looks at her, and he kind of does like, he looks at her and then he kind of looks at her again, and it's almost like he's trying to figure out like what's her next move, or like who has she become in a way. Even though I think he's mostly on board with everything. I think he definitely believes her now, but I'm kind of almost wondering like, oh, could there be more to that story? I'm not really sure, but it almost seemed like they were hinting at like, I don't know if he's 100% like sure of what to do with knowing that she's out there and that she might go kill more people even if they do deserve it. It's kind of an interesting thing how she just kind of has the suit in her bag, and you're like, oh man, they could do anything with that. But I honestly though, I almost feel like it would be fine if they didn't. And you know, it's a complete story, but it also has that potential, I guess, to go further.
I say you write that fanfic, because I definitely got a definitive "the story's over" vibe from the movie myself.
Well, I think like John or like Derek was saying, like they wouldn't have made a point to show that she still had that suit if they weren't trying to make a point of like there's something that could come of it. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that there needs to be a sequel that shows that. I do think they're trying to show like, you know, she's keeping it because she plans on using it in some capacity.
Really? I thought they were just showing it so that he has a visual cue to look at to see that she in fact did it. That's where he looks in the bag, he sees the suit, and then he knows that she did it. Up until that point, he didn't know. He was asking what was happening. So I just thought that was a visual shortcut for them to acknowledge that he realized she did it.
But I think to kind of like, I think to cut the cord on that, or to kind of like make it fully resolved, they would have found a way to like not have it be on her person when she left. I think that was a deliberate choice. Again, I don't think that's necessarily saying that Whannell did that with the idea in mind of like, okay, we're going to open this up for sequels. But I think just the fact that that's there and the fact that this is making money, the reality is that, you know, studios like making money. Hey, so if there's an opportunity to leverage that.
Listen, anything can be, you know, they came out with Titanic 2. That movie is a thing. I have no idea, but I think it for me it plays into Whannell's B sensibilities. Why talk it out, whereas in a noir the person looks over, sees, you know, the gun in the bag or something like that, and that visual cue just implies the emotion. You know, I think he has that kind of economic sense of storytelling baked into him that I just find fascinating, and I can hardly wait to rewatch it again, because I just get it. It's, I mean, the story itself, if you know, you take out what we have in the new one, it's you know, it's fantasy, it's ridiculous, and he embraces a little bit of that, I think. Other than the message that the movie carries, the movie is still inherently ridiculous, right? I mean, at its core, of course it is. A lot of horror is, right? But I think he truly loves this kind of material, and I think that's, you know, a big part of why it's so strong.
And he treats it seriously. You know, he doesn't do it jokey or winky. No. You know, it's fully sincere, fully earnest, and going for the scares, not for, you know, hey, this is wacky.
It's full of love. There's no cynicism in it at all. And
with the shared universe, it's not like, you know, if someone had been waiting in a car to pick her up and the license plate said like hide or something, we don't know that any of that's going to happen.
Can you imagine?
That's an alternate ending.
That will be on the Blu-ray.
That
maybe
honestly would have pissed me off so much and ruined the entire movie. And it shouldn't, but it would have.
And that's how they introduce, like, whether it's Russell Crowe or whoever is playing, you know, like the Dr. Hyde character. Like you said, Scott, I'll just save all this for fan fiction.
You know, better yet, you see like Johnny Depp in some half-ass, you know, makeup driving down the street. That really would have just been the icing on the cake. It's like, oh, he's going to be Hyde now. Even better.
Oh boy. Well, if we before we wrap things up, speaking of future things that we're still waiting to see what happens, Leigh Whannell, this movie is obviously super successful out of the gate, and he's signed a 2-year first look deal with Blumhouse. Just curious, what do you all want to see him do next? Like, do you want to see him tackle another Universal monster movie? Do you want to see him do something completely original, like Upgrade again? Where do you think like his career is going to go next? Because it seems like he has pretty much the pick of the litter at this point.
Personally, I'm loving what he's doing with the Invisible stuff. So I'm hoping he'll have a chat with Disney and he can do a remake of Now You See Him, Now You Don't, with Kurt Russell as Dexter Riley. And Kurt Russell will still be in this one as Dexter Riley.
Like it's kind of like H40, like Halloween, where it's just X amount of years later.
That's right. Have you ever seen Now You See Him, Now You Don't?
I have not, but I've seen you tweet about it. I've seen little clips on Twitter, and it looks delightful.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Can we just bring back, just do a series of reinvigorating, all the Kurt Russell Disney movies, The World's Strongest Man, The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes.
Yeah, the whole Dexter Riley trilogy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. There's your shared universe right there. The Rileyverse.
No wonder Snake Plissken was so grizzled. That's amazing.
I'll tell you what, if I can talk Kurt Russell into doing a Rileyverse where he plays Dexter Riley and his grandson gets into all kinds of different mischief.
Oh, like he finds stuff in the attic, and
we'll go to Disney Plus. We'll back up the truck. They can pour the money in and we'll drive away.
What could go wrong?
And we'll keep costs down. We'll just do it on Disney Plus. It doesn't need to be a theatrical release, at least for the first movie or two.
No, screw that. Just Disney Plus.
Yeah.
I'm sure this has no trouble getting off the ground. I mean, they're definitely buying ideas right now. So I think
Disney's actually already sued us in the amount of time that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Well, in that case,
they sued us, and spoiler alert, I'm still broke.
Blood from a stone, Disney.
What about you, Tamika? Is there anything you want to see Leigh Whannell do next? Or are you just in line for whatever he does next, regardless of what it is?
Oh yeah, I just want to see whatever he does next. But I did have a thought. I believe it was you, Derek, that brought up Snake Plissken, and they are going to do Escape from New York, I believe it is.
He was attached to that at one point. Is it still on or is it off?
I'm not 100% sure because it's been a little while since there was a concrete update. I know at one point, Robert Rodriguez was attached, and then Leigh Whannell was working on the script, but I don't know if, I think it's kind of one of those projects that's still up in the air. And I guess now I would have to imagine they'd want him to do it. I would think that it's up to him at this point, but that's kind of speculation. But that one is still up in the air.
So at least as of February 1st, according to the Hollywood Reporter, according to the Hollywood Reporter, Leigh Whannell is the person they're tapping to do a remake.
Nice.
For Fox.
Well, there we go.
And I vaguely remember him mentioning something where he said, if I'm going to do this, if we're going to have to recast Snake Plissken, then we might as well do it with Wyatt Russell.
Oh my gosh!
Which I would totally be down for.
Oh wow! We already got
good.
We got a taste of.
He really is good too.
Right?
Like in Overlord, right?
Overlord. He was doing his dad in Overlord.
Phrasing.
And I loved it. Totally was. It was total that his performance in that movie was completely a tribute to his dad, because you see him in other stuff like Goon.
Oh God.
And he's not he gives a totally different performance.
But his look in Goon, I was did they pull Kurt Russell out of The Thing and put him in a hockey outfit?
No kidding, right?
And then, and then the Herb Brooks connection there too with Kurt Russell. But yeah, that would be very interesting. That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to see that. I think just see how it turns out. I don't know. My curiosity.
Brian, do you have any Leigh Whannell dream projects? Are you good with the Escape from New York?
The more I think about it, the better I am with it. I'll be honest, of all of Carpenter stuff, for whatever reason, Escape from New York is one of the few that don't really hit me the way that it seems to connect with other people. So I'd be interested to see Whannell take a swing at it, especially if he does bring in Wyatt Russell as Pliskin.
As long as he puts the chandelier on the car hood, I will be fine. That's the recasting I'm really worried about. Do we still get a chandelier in this digital age?
You don't like Escape from New York?
I thought it was fine.
I don't know why everyone's laughing. Like Brian said, he doesn't like Escape from New York. I want to know why.
Hot take alert.
It's just there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just one of those ones that doesn't like it. It doesn't leave me with that feeling that I get from most of Carpenter's other stuff, like Big Trouble in Little China, The Thing, The Fog. Those are movies like where I'm done, I'm just like, oh man, that was such a great meal. But after I'll do you one further. I actually like Escape from LA more than I like Escape from New York.
Ooh, we got to do this on a Hot Takes episode.
Come on, Kurt Russell and Peter Fonda surfboarding down a canal in L.A.
And Bruce Campbell, right?
Yes.
I recorded the theme of Escape from New York on my boombox when I was a kid. And I would listen to it as a song because it kicks so much ass.
Oh, I have that on multiple Spotify playlists. I love the theme song.
Mm-hmm.
The movie's perfect, and you need to go in a corner or something. I haven't decided yet.
Do I need to get under the table that we don't actually have?
But I'm very, very best.
That's not for the public to know. We have a table. It's you just can't see it. It's invisible. And with that horrible joke, another episode of Corpse Club comes to an end. We want to thank Brian. We really thank you, our amazingly talented engineer, for making us sound good every episode, even me, which is not easy to do. And as always, we want to thank our listeners, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Make sure to visit corpseclub.com to check out our latest episode and all previous episodes. You can also sign up to become a member, which will give you access to all sorts of goodies, including the recent Stage Fright audio commentary by Brian and Scott, along with some other fun things. So be sure to check that out. Don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. Every rating and review really helps. You can also find us on Google Play, SoundCloud, and all of your favorite podcast providers. I believe we're also on YouTube and Pandora now. So be sure to check us out wherever you want to stream something. If you want to get in touch, you can reach us anytime at contact@corpseclub.com or on Twitter @DailyDeadNews and on Instagram and Facebook under Corpse Club. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay scary.